Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into my podcast. This week's agenda, we will be going back in time and looking at the civil rights and the movements they made. So, to start off with this podcast, we will be looking at one man who did the impossible and was arrested for believing in something. You probably know him as Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man with a lot of strong beliefs and who could persuade a lot of people to do the right thing and fight back. He was placed behind bars around 30 times due to civil disobedience, but that didn't stop him from pushing forward and leading all of his followers to the end. Also during this time, President John F. Kennedy made changes and he worked hard to try to help the African Americans. American history has been marked by persistent and determined efforts to expand the scope and influences of civil rights. Although equal rights were all affirmed in the founding documents of the United States, many of the new countries' inhabitants were denied essential rights. The African Americans, slaves, and indentured servants did not have the intellectual right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The British colonists asserted to justify their Declaration of Independence, nor were they included among the people of the United States, who established the Constitution in order to promote the general welfare and secure of blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. Now, back to the problem at hand. Now, I have one question during my research. What was it like to be in one of those protests? And what was it like to be led by by Martin Luther King Jr. himself? And yes, I know there are a lot of stories about all of that, but it never really tells the perspective of just a normal African American believing in his or her rights, standing up to the government. So, I did some research and I found one story. You might know her as Rosa Parks, the woman who refused to give up her seat to a white man. This act caught a lot of people's attention because no one really had, for the lack of better term, the balls to do that. But Rosa Parks did. Later she recalled that her refusal wasn't because she was physically tired, but she was tired of giving in. I'm going to change gears a little bit and talk about the music back then. If you know me at all, I love old music, the way it's all so authentic and people actually send stories through song. The last couple of songs were jazz from the 1960s. I'm going to play a short piece called Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday. This harrowing song was inspired by the 1930 lynching of African Americans. Thomas Shipp and Abraham Smith in Warren, Indiana, and became closely associated with Holiday, who recorded it in 1939 and again in 1944.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root.
Now when I think of this song, a lot of things come to me, like the blood in the roots, the blood in the leaves. It's very connected to the lynching, which I've said before, and it's powerful because in the beginning, it sounds the saxophone sounds like it's like swaying, almost like the dead bodies of lynching, the dead bodies of African Americans swinging on the tree. And as you hear in the background, she's still talking about the dead people swinging, and it's just powerful because it's so ironic and just powerful that a man or a person would do such a thing to another person. The next song is called Prayer, Protest, and Peace by Max Roach, counterpiece of the landmark 1960s civil rights-centered album We Insist, Max Roach's Freedom Now suit. This three-part track is a versatile improvised duet between Roach's drums and the remarkable voice of Abbey Lincoln, tracing the parallels between slavery in America and the bondage of apartheid in South Africa. Now, as I listen to this piece, it gives a lot of strained vibes. She does have a very remarkable voice, and it's very beautiful, but at the same time, it's very strange, and there's no lyrics. And the vibe I get off of it is that she's, like, praying or talking to God or whoever and asking for him for guidance, and that's what I heard. And the background, the drums is just smooth and pleasant. Now, how this all connects back to the civil rights and all that and the rebellion and the protests is all these songs have connections to things that happened either during the civil rights movements or before, like the lynching, and they all the music in here has their own protest, has their own way of speaking against the government, and that's something. And it's really cool to watch how creative people are in this time and how creative they are in protesting against the government and all that stuff. How does this all connect back to E pluribus unum? Out of many, one. Well, as I finish my podcast, I'll explain it to you. All these stuff is a protest. All these protests are trying to fight for their rights and become part of the United States and become one. And not a lot of people realize that, but it's true that yes, they are trying to become one in the states of the America. Well, thank you guys for listening to my podcast. Hopefully you guys appreciate it, and see you guys later. And as a special treat to you guys, I will be playing one of my favorite songs from the 1960s, "Oh Pretty Woman" by Ray Orbison.
Pretty woman, walking down the street, pretty woman, the kind I like to meet, pretty woman. I don't believe you, you're not the truth. No one could look as good as you. Mercy. Pretty woman, won't you pardon me, pretty woman? I couldn't help but see, pretty woman, that you look as lovely as can be. Are you lonely just like me?
Thanks, and I'll see you next time.